So, and I think this is where I get this clash of this idea of the ego versus the egolessness, and you know, you know, and it actually it comes back to this idea even of the word alpha, right? What is alpha? I was watching oh, it's one of these guys I started watching years ago, Elliot. I want to say Hool, but I could be butchering the man's name, so I apologize. But so I started watching him years ago, and I haven't watched him in a while, and I stumbled across his video the other day, and I think so his company is doing really well, and his I guess his business is thriving, and then so I got caught up a little bit in terms of the activities that he's up to these days, and then I caught another video of his where he was talking about sort of his perceptions on this concept of alpha, which is something I'm also very much interested in. The alpha, to me, and it's sort of just intuitively, I think of alpha as an intuitive thing, but then there's the way that alpha is defined in pop culture. And alpha usually in pop culture is sort of this brute guy who's kind of like, I'm the biggest guy and I'm the toughest guy, and I, right, you know, um, and I've known some of those guys, right? And I know that a lot of guys self-identify as alpha and who are kind of like, I'm the biggest guy, I'm the toughest guy. And then then there's this whole leadership thing, which is very, sort of in the zeitgeist of contemporary society, and in the rise of the entrepreneur. Another big thing that we're all about is, leaders. What makes a good leader? What constitutes a good leader? So there's a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of that conversation being had, and I think rightfully so. I think in an era where people can start to become sort of an economy of me, I think these are good questions to ask yourself, and to be able to align yourself with, and to understand techniques and methods and lifestyles that align with this idea of sort of cultivating your own unique set of winning attributes, right? So what does the alpha have to do with any of that? So I know how we think about the alpha, how we talk about the alpha, how we characterize the alpha, and the alpha is the top dog. To put it plainly, in plain speak, an alpha is the top dog. And we are a society that really caters to the top dog. So whoever the top dog is, and top dog doesn't have to be the nicest person in the room. The top dog is simply just the top dog, right? Is the earner, is the king of the mountain, is our top dog. And however method, and in a Machiavellian culture, the ends justify the means. So however you got there is how you got there. And the fact that you are there is what defines you as the alpha, end of story. So I think in a black and white context, not racial, I just mean like in a binary context, winner versus loser, that kind of thing, that's sort of how pop culture treats the alpha, or how the pop culture categorizes. And so I've been thinking about the alpha a lot lately, and thinking about leadership. I think about leadership all the time, mainly because I'm constantly I've wanted my own company for a really long time, and I believe in I sort of believe in this, the potential of the time that we're in, where there's a lot of opportunity for self-starters and the economy of me sort of thing. So I'm a big believer in these things. So I'm studying, and I'm looking, and I'm analyzing, and I'm trying to assess what all of this means, and what role is there for the alpha, and how does a woman sort of play into these things, the role of the feminine, how do all of these things come together? So here's my take, here's my thing, and I have an issue with language. Pay attention to language. I think we need to pay attention to language, and language use. And so as I'm thinking about this idea of the alpha, and what role does the alpha play, how do we feel about the alpha? And in the binary world, in the world of scarcity, in the world of hierarchy, the definition of the alpha is a very narrow one, right? Generally speaking, this idea of the top dog. My experience, though, in emotionally with an alpha is very different than that. I mean, not that they aren't top dogs. I think an alpha tends that is true. But how do you arrive at being a top dog? So to me, I do differentiate between the alpha that is the Machiavellian alpha versus the alpha that is a natural alpha. The Machiavellian alpha is a consciousness alpha, an alpha that is kill or be killed, do or die, anything goes, ends justify the mean alpha. Which to me doesn't resonate as a true alpha. That is an alpha that is a product of the paradigm, the scarcity paradigm. A natural alpha, I don't think, and not that they couldn't display those characteristics. I think they probably could, and probably do, given the criteria. But I think the preference in an alpha, and the tendency or the charm or the natural appeal, the natural appeal of the alpha, doesn't necessitate, I think, that kind of strong arming or heavy-handedness. Or I liked how Eliot described it. He said there are a lot of theta energies, which are sort of high-strung, high-aggressive energies that are masquerading as alphas. And I thought that's a really good distinction for me, because that's what I reckon. I see, and I don't think that there are a lot of alphas in life. I think that alphas are not that common, and I think in pop culture we've sort of smushed them all together and said alphas are just, the alpha is the top dog, anybody's the top dog, and that's how we. But I don't think so. I mean, I've been in the presence of alphas who I identify as alphas, and to me, an alpha is a person that you just naturally follow. The alpha is the natural Pied Piper in the room, right? The person who everybody just, for whatever reason, you're pulled towards their energy, and they're very, appealing, very not manipulative, just naturally. They have a natural, they're snake charmers, right? And I think of alphas like so here's an example that I used the other day. I can think of being in situations and conversations with, and I'm a very I have opinions, I have ideas. I don't think of myself as stubborn, but I've been called stubborn. I am not. I think I'm a very open-minded, and I like to talk. Sometimes I like to talk, and I where I see a question, I ask, right? So I can be I can appear or be perceived as, I don't think that I am combative. I don't think that I am confrontational at all, actually. I think I'm a very harmonious, I think of myself as a very harmonious and very sensual person. But yeah, when I have a question, I ask, and yeah, and I've gotten into debates with all kinds of people over all kinds of things. And to me, what I've noticed with many alphas, so the alphas that are masquerading as alphas, who to me don't represent alpha energy, but they're strong, like they're aggressive, they're strong, and they're leaders in their own right. They are leaders, but they're not what I would think of as an alpha. They're, and in this instance, in my experience, I've been in these kinds of conversations with guys who would call themselves alphas, and I guess we would all call them alphas, but who, when confronted with women who are challenging, who resort to dominance behavior as a means of exerting control of the situation. right? So as opposed to just sort of either meeting you where you are in terms of the conversation intellectually, or agreeing to disagree, right, lovingly, right? That those times where I've experienced alphas who have the ability to share space with women who are, I mean, I don't even know what to call it. And it doesn't have to be me. I just, based on what I've seen, right? Some men are very few men are very comfortable in the space of women who are challenging, right? And that's very rare. A lot of times what I see alphas, which are to me alphas, so these particular alphas are alphas in name only, who when they come across women who are challenging, become aggressive, become dominant, become violent, become offended, who are very reactionary and react in that killer be killed sort of way to women. So men who resort to name calling, men who resort to manipulation tactics, men who resort to violence, or just sort of just male aggression, right? So they have to become male, very male, nakedly male, in order to share space with feminine ideas. And so to me, and I've been around a lot of alphas, corporate world, physical. I'm a very physical woman, so I'm around physical guys a lot, or have been in my life. So I've been around lots of alphas, and I've been around very few true alphas, which to me are the kinds of guys who are not simply physically dominant, but who have a sort of emotional wellspring, and who are very inviting of people and ideas, but who still sort of have this natural capacity for filling up the space, but they fill up the space in a very loving way. So it's very easy to be around them, and it's very easy to be engaged with them, and it's very easy. It's even easy to disagree with them because they have this nature that allows you your space, and that's a very rare thing. And to me, that is true alpha. That is somebody who you will follow wherever they go, because there's just a natural, they exude something. And so what does the alpha talk have to do with the ego talk? So it's this idea of how we talk about things in pop culture that always makes me a little bit uncomfortable. So when I think about how we talk about alphas, and I feel like there's a lot of miseducation. So I almost feel like now I want to come up with a new definition for what I think of an alpha energy. Because I feel like we've run away with this idea of the alpha just being this big tough guy. Just like with the ego, we've run away with this idea of the ego being this thing that we need to crush and destroy. And either way, I'm like, no, that's not how I feel about these things. I don't feel like the alpha is this extreme masculine, aggressive energy that is the ends justify the means, Machiavellian. I don't feel like Machiavellian is alpha. I think alphas can exhibit Machiavellian traits if the situation is called for, but I don't think that an alpha is by nature Machiavellian. And likewise, I don't think that the ego is this sort of singularly this self-serving manipulative agent that should be sort of eviscerated from the self, from the being. Ego, which I agree can run rampant and get out of control, and has, and I think in a large part of our society there's a problem with the ego. But ego has a part to play. It has a role to play. It is a necessary part of your learning, right? The distinction between you and the other is not, it's not a violent one. It's not an unhealthy thing to recognize separation. There's something beautiful about separation. There's something beautiful about distinction. There's something beautiful about difference, right? So, and your capacity to recognize it and to appreciate it as separate, even though fundamentally we know it's not, there is something very healthy, I think, about that. And also, I think within a construct that it, by its very nature, is um, call it insidious, your ability to see things clearly is going to be the thing that helps you to navigate the construct, right? So while it is important to see the oneness, for instance, I also think that the distinctions are important too, because seeing the differences and being able to identify them and say, okay, well, that seems like an inequality or an injustice or something that invalidates my individuality for the sake of somebody else's gain, that's problematic to me, right? So I have to call into question not the ultimate vision of oneness. Who can call into question that? As I say, if you're on a mission to embody Christ consciousness, I respect that. I don't disagree with that. But what I'm saying is that I don't think that Christ consciousness is necessarily simply about the eradication of the ego. I would even go so far as to say, like, if you think about some of these gurus and some of these spiritual leaders and some of these iconic characters, I'd say they are absolutely alphas in their own right, in what it is they do and how it is they display their sense of individuality and their willingness to go their own way, their willingness to be distinct from the construct that we are all sort of trapped inside of. And so I think there is, to me, I identify ego in that willingness to be distinct, right? So even though I know that the ultimate vision, the ultimate goal, the ultimate quest, emotionally and spiritually and psychically, is to recognize that there is no separation, I think that the ability to see the construct requires the ego. Do you understand what I mean?